Hi, my name is Delisa Fields. I am a quality trainer and quality coordinator with Student Discipline and Behavior Support, and we are about to discuss a social emotional learning group starter template that you can use with your students. So we're going to follow a theme. The theme is going to be based upon self-management. Um, Most of you know that social emotional learning has 5 competencies. And so in these video series, we'll discuss each of the 5 competencies, and we'll provide numerous examples of templates that you can use to facilitate your SEL groups and to hold discussion with your students. So let's get started. So we're talking about self-management. This SEL group starter will work really well with the Responding to Tragedies unit in our Caring Schools curriculum. So feel free to adapt it accordingly, make it personal to you, make it work for you. For this particular video, we are going to look at uh, or reflect on, I guess I should say, the life of Chadwick Boseman. We should all be familiar with his triumphant story. Unfortunately, it had a tragic end, but there are some very powerful pieces of insight that we can glean from Mr. Bozeman's life, especially the last 4 years. And so if you're facilitating an SEL group, and you're going to use self-management as a competency to discuss with your students, this will be a really good topic because it's going to generate a lot of interest, a lot of discussion, and you'll often hear me talk about the importance of generating that discussion because after all, that's the gist of social emotional learning, to build social skills, to help our students develop social skills. So using topics that are trending, that are meaningful to our students, will be very, very helpful to you as a facilitator in terms of engaging that discussion and making sure that our students are staying connected throughout the course of your discussion group, your SEL group. So we're going to look at the life of Chadwick Boseman and, to what degree you know about him. This is just, again, starter video. You can do your own research, you can incorporate it, adapt it, and just make it work for you, okay? So first we want to begin the group with self-management, defining what that means. And when I held social emotional learning groups at our short-term suspension sites, I would often poll my students before I would, share or define, give the proper definition. I would ask them and just see what their level of understanding is, and then it would help me gauge how deep I need to go into explaining what it is and how many examples, or what levels of demonstrating or educating them on that particular competency. So it's a good idea to poll them and just say, hey, can anybody tell me what self-management means? Has anybody ever heard of self-management? And based upon the responses you get, you can give feedback. You can also say, well, can you give me an example of what self-management is, the time that you self-managed? And again, it's going to build into helping them to identify that skill set and then helping them to develop it. So the Oxford Dictionary defines self-management as management of or by oneself, the taking of responsibility for one's own behavior and well-being. And you can use that definition or you can use another one. It's totally up to you. So I've got a picture of this deeply thoughtful, beautiful animal as a backdrop. But at this point, after you defined what self-management is, after your students have had an opportunity to be introduced or reintroduced to self-management, then you want to explore that. And this is all the work you do before you actually get into the meat of your group. So you want to, again, you want to build social emotional learning skills, all about building relationships, building that community. And so you're going to engage them and you're going to ask them questions and you're going to draw feedback from them. So you're going to ask them to provide an example of self-management. So once you've introduced the topic, good morning, boys and girls, or good afternoon, boys and girls. Today we're going to be talking about self-management. Does anybody know what self-management means? and then you're going to go into your definition of self-management, and then you want to plow a little bit deeper. So let's provide some examples. Who can give me an example of self-management? So you're going to have the students briefly share their personal examples of times when they've self-managed, because many times people self-manage without even knowing it. It's sort of intrinsic. So they don't even know, like, okay, well, I didn't know that I was, and again, that would be a really good point to hone in and say, well, you know what, you didn't even know, I bet you didn't know that that was self-management. For example, keeping their cool when losing a game. That would be especially the middle schoolers who love to play Fortnite. And they would say, well, I remember I was playing and I lost and they shot me or whatever. And so, that would be a good plug in there to say, well, I bet you didn't know that you were using self-management. I bet you didn't know. Another example is staying calm when falsely accused by a parent or something a sibling did. So what did you do? Well, I just went to my room and shut my door. So what could you have done? I could have kicked, I could have cursed, I could have slapped, but I went to my room and shut my door. So that was an example of self-management. I took responsibility for my own actions and I went to a cool off place and got myself together. Another example, and you find this popular in high school, I was wanting to save money. I'm working, and I wanted to save some money, but the new Jordan's out or the new whatever, iPhone, you name it. And so just not being able to put restrictions in place to save money because they saw something else that they wanted. Another example, especially true to right now, is, I'm not able to stay connected on Zoom. I'm distracted or what have you. So these are some really good, just some examples, of course, of some of the feedback that you may get from your students in terms of what they feel what their examples of self-management has been. Another tool that I found very helpful that I want to share and pass along to you all is using movies. Of course, they're going to be school appropriate, but using movies to help uh, uh, drive home the definition and the meaning of self-management. And so if you're working with a younger group of students, perhaps you've got K-8, well, let's say K-5, and you are looking for some material to connect with your students. Most of them are watching Disney movies and other types of things, maybe something on, well, I would say TikTok. I don't know. But, video can help drive home your purpose for your self-management group. So here I chose the movie Frozen. I don't know if you had a chance to see it. It is a delightful movie. But at any rate, there are several examples of self-management that you will find throughout the course of that movie that you can use in your groups. And so I would say if we were in a physical setting, I would perhaps have a backdrop, like maybe a picture or a poster sort of on the wall or whatnot, or maybe a little doll, a little statue. My kids are grown, so I don't really know what to call it now, but like a little toy of Elsa or whatever. But at any rate, you want to bring something that will help to drive, to generate interest and generate discussion. So you're going to talk about the movie. Has anyone seen Frozen? And so then you start asking questions. Well, why was it important for Elsa to control her anger? And if you haven't seen it, I won't take the time to go into it, but look, just take a look at it for self-management purposes, if that's your thing. But Elsa certainly had some anger issues, and there were problems whenever Elsa became upset and people were affected. And let me tell you something, if you're into facilitating restorative practice circles, you could also use this because people were injured and harmed by some of Elsa's decisions. And so you could double and use that. And maybe at one point I'll do a template for that as well. But just know that you can also, and I often found it helpful to incorporate restorative practices in my SEL groups. And I mean, you're what is the saying? You take two birds down with one stone or whatever. I'm sure I said that wrong. But at any rate, you can, if that's something you're interested in doing, you can easily incorporate restorative practices into your SEL groups and without even realizing it, you are opening up your student to a world of being considerate, being compassionate, showing welfare, demonstrating welfare for mankind, and helping to build them into being successful, contributing members of our society. It's very important. So why was it important for Elsa to control her anger? So these are just questions that you're gonna poll your students. I've just taken the liberty of creating some, but as you view it, or maybe you do a background search, you may want to use other questions, and that's perfectly fine. What happened when Elsa became upset? Who suffered? So these, if you have taken restorative practices, you'll notice that these questions are in line with promoting restorative practice. Who suffered as a result of Elsa's anger? Who helped Elsa overcome her anger, frustration, or hurt? And so this is talking about self-management and is using a movie that most of our students are familiar with. And so, you know, there may be the case where they may go back and watch it again, and they'll view it through a different lens. They won't just look at it for entertainment, but they'll look at this movie through the eyes of social emotional learning and can see the dangers. And if you can, I don't know what your school admins will allow, but maybe showing a short clip of a time when she was, and I actually tried to find one, but time just wasn't on my side, but maybe showing the class or the group a short clip of a time when she became angry, and just to give them a visual, especially for the students who don't have access to it, right? Just giving them a visual of what her anger looked like and why it's important. And so here you can take this conversation and go to the moon. I mean, you can go so many places with this. You can talk about, well, you may not, because when Elsa became upset, she would turn things to ice, hence the word frozen. And everything would just ice over. And so, you may say, well, Johnny, and in most of my videos, I'm going to use Johnny. I don't know why. I had a little cute little boy named Johnny, kindergarten, first, second grade student. Anyway, you may say, so Johnny, what happens when you're angry? What effect does it have on those around you? And having that student to compare, wow, when Elsa gets upset, everything freezes up. I notice when I get upset, my mom cries, or my little brother runs and hides from me, or what have you. And so helping them to understand the importance of self-management, because the lack thereof is detrimental to those who are around you. So let's look at another example. This is going to appeal to your older students. So here we have the famous Karate Kid. This is the more recent version featuring uh, Jaden Smith, I think his name is. And if you haven't seen it, it's okay. But these are questions that I drew from the movie that pertained to self-management. Again, when you're facilitating groups, you want to do the background for whatever content that you're going to present to your group. So if you were to use the Karate Kid, so then of course you'd probably have to watch it, or at least a couple of clips, some YouTube clips or what have you, just so that you can engage the content with your students and speak from a place of knowledge. So the questions that I posed: why was Dre angry? Why was he upset? Why should be why, excuse me, what piqued Dre's interest in learning karate? What motivated him? What inspired him? What were the first techniques that Mr. Han taught Dre, and why? And listen, if you don't use any of these questions, number 3 is definitely one you want to use. What were the first techniques and why? Why? And if you've seen the movie, you notice that Mr. Han told, Dre wanted Mr. Han to teach him how to do karate because he was being bullied or what have you. And again, that's some really good conversation that you could center around bullying. And so Dre is thinking that Mr. Han is going to show him all of these moves or whatnot, sort of like Ralph Macchio from back in the day. And Mr. Miyagi was like, no, that's what we're not going to do, right? So you can even incorporate the old Karate Kid. You can make your self-management group out of all 3 versions. I think it was a young lady. And you can do a whole Karate Kid series off of this, right? But Dre is thinking that Mr. Hans is going to show him all of these moves, and Mr. Han tells him, pick up your coat, put it on the coat rack, drop it to the floor, pick up the coat. And Dre was heated, okay, because that was not his expectation. And so the question then is, why did Mr. Han require Dre to do that? building discipline, teaching him how to be respectful, to respect your property, listen to your mom. So discipline is going to be a good theme, a good piece of goodness that you can plug in right here. He learned discipline. In order to self-manage, you've got to be self-disciplined. Okay. And so what happened when Dre learned to discipline his anger? And of course, by the end of the movie, Dre won the championship and all was well. So it is important here. Um, you know, I was going to say this, I usually plug in my feelings check-in toward the beginning of the group. Um, I encourage you to do that. But here, I place it here intentionally because we're about to move into the meat of your discussion. And the reason why I'm including it here as opposed to at the beginning of the lesson is because Mr. Boseman has, of course, passed away. And so you want to sort of check in on where your students are because this discussion may trigger grief. It may trigger some type of pain. It may trigger, you just want to be certain. You don't want to just say, well, okay, let's talk about Chadwick Boseman because you're not really certain where everyone is. You know, he was a phenomenal young man and his life inspired many, still does, even at this point. And of course, with one of his greatest um, accomplishments as the Black Panther, many people were inspired by that. I mean, it was a whole cultural move in the movie theaters. People were wearing their African cultural attire, what have you. So his life impacted many. And so you want to tread this discussion carefully. And so that's why I intentionally placed this feelings check-in here. Even if you do a feelings check-in in the beginning, that's fine. But I would encourage you just, you know, because of the nature of the conversation, check in on your students, okay? So you're gonna have a copy of your feelings chart or the mood meter. Some people call it a mood meter. We call it a feelings chart. You wanna have a copy of that available. It's filled with emojis. I'm gonna show you a copy of that in just a minute. If you don't have a copy, just email me and we'll send you a digital copy and you can print it and laminate it and so forth. We'll make sure that you have a copy. But it uses, the reason why we prefer it in STBS is because it uses emojis, and we find that many students have difficulty describing how they feel. I mean, there's some adults that don't know, but particularly as we're teaching our students, we want to make sure that they understand or they understand the importance of identifying their feelings. So, and I'm going to show that to you in just a minute. So the emojis are going to help students identify their feelings because many times I would say, okay, a little Johnny, how do you feel? Oh, I'm feeling, I'm all right. Well, what does that mean? I can't, what does all right mean? And so you want to explore and make sure that they feel comfortable identifying and expressing how they feel. So the chart is going to provide those proper words for their feelings. The feelings chart is divided into 4 quadrants. It's a yellow quadrant, which represents high energy, high pleasantness. The green quadrant represents low energy, high pleasantness. The blue quadrant represents low energy, low pleasantness. And the red quadrant represents high energy, low pleasantness. And so you've got a student in red, you have a student who is about to go into crisis, and you want to attempt to bring them down to blue, quite possibly to green. So in checking in with your students' feelings, make certain not to judge or criticize the student for the feelings they choose to exhibit. It's not up for us to agree or not. This is how they feel, and we are entitled to the way that we feel. But with that, I often teach it to my students. You are entitled to the way you feel, but with that entitlement, you have a responsibility to those who are around you. So here's the feelings chart. And as I stated, we're divided into 4 quadrants. You've got your red, the more agitated, crisis mode place. You've got blue, which is low energy, but no pleasantness there, right? Very low pleasantness. I'm not feeling well, I'm sick, I'm exhausted, grieving. And this is again why I wanted you all to check in to make sure if your student is here, then you want to pause before you move into the next phase of your group. You got your green, which is low energy, high pleasantness, and they're loving, they're peaceful, they're in a good place. And then of course you got your students in yellow, and they are the little bubbly ones that don't Know how to sit still and stop talking. Okay. All right. So now we're going to get into the actual lesson on self-management, and we're going to look at the life of Chadwick Boseman, most famously known as the Black Panther. What an awesome legend that he was. So again, just a disclaimer, follow your students' emotions for this part of the lesson. In one of my videos, I teach that we should allow the students to own the group, but we control the group. And I know that sounds like, okay, what? But allow them to feel free in sharing whatever it is that's on their heart, as long as it's school appropriate. Let them share, let them discuss, but you remain in control of the group. As long as they're not becoming offensive, I should have shared my group norms here, this in another video, but as long as they're not being offensive, as long as they're not agitating or bullying or disrespecting another group mate, it's okay, let them share. You're gonna hear in some of my groups and some of your groups, you're gonna hear, if you haven't already, some unpleasant things that you're gonna, like, wow, I can't believe that this student is going through this or that that's happened to them. But you gotta stay with your group, okay? Don't wander off and start telling your sad stories, because it's not your group, it's their group, okay? You are facilitating it for them, not for you. So students may want to talk about Mr. Boseman's self-management. And you may poll, well, who knows about Chadwick Boseman, or who knows about Black Panther? You better believe hands are gonna go up, they're gonna be excited. And so in that, to preserve time, say, well, I want two people, give me two members of the group who can tell me. And that way you can sort of, navigate that with a little bit more ease. Some of them may experience grief. Really looked up to him, and he was my role model, and I can't believe he's gone, and it's COVID, and I can't see my teacher. So you be prepared for that, okay? Be prepared for where their feelings may go, and walk their pace. Don't feel as if, well, I've got to get this group done before the next 20 minutes. No, don't, because you're going to do them a disservice, and you're going to release them from that group uh, in an unhealthy place. And that's where they're going to return to their class. They're going to act up. Because you released them from that group, and they haven't had a chance to decompress. So follow their feelings. If you see that they can't take too much of the discussion, back it up some, walk it back. Okay, and just make sure that they're just always pay attention to their level of comfort. Follow their feelings and guide the discussion accordingly. Now, in our Caring Schools curriculum, we have workbooks, topics. One is responding to tragedy that I included. And I took the liberty of just um, including this directly from the workbook for grades 3 through 5. And I'm not going to read all of this, of course, but you want to. I think there was something I want to pull out here. Yeah, in that, share the basic facts about what happened. You don't have to get into all the details, because again, you want to watch for triggers. All right. So share the basic facts about what happened, open up for questions, and so that you can clarify. So again, it's not enough to just watch the movie and say, okay, let's do a group on Chadwick Boseman. There was more to his life than the Black Panther. Okay. There were people lives that he had family. He had recently got married. So you want to just do your work for the group, put that work in, so that when questions are asked, you can provide answers to the best of your ability. So you want to have basic facts about what happened, then take questions, clarify any inaccuracies or misunderstandings, and don't speculate. Just provide, just like I think the movie back, a TV show back in the day was entitled Dragnet, and Dan Aykroyd would say, just give me the facts. Just give them the facts. Don't worry. You don't have to feel like you knew him. You went to school together. You're in the same frat. Just give your students the facts, and then move on with that. And then here, I love this: share accounts of assistance, courage, or kindness. So look at some of the things that he had done, and share that. Moving on to the middle grades, grades 6 through 8, they're going to process a little bit differently. They heard more about it. They're Google experts. And so you want to be prepared to discuss the event in detail. Don't get too graphic, okay? And here, this is very important. You want to leave time or allow time for students to vent their frustrations and concerns and help them to use those feeling words. You know, I feel sad because he's gone. I feel I'm grieving, right? So help them to feel comfortable using those vocabulary words, social emotional vocabulary words. And again, share some of the good things that he's done. It would be helpful to have pictures and so forth. So here I've taken the liberty of, I included a video that he had done, and I'm just going to tell you, listen, y'all, I teared up a little bit, like my eyes were sweating because it was so meaningful. I'm going to show you this video in just a minute. But here you have a friend of Chadwick's, and he mentioned how, these were uh, some quotes that, and I saw you see that I emboldened the ones that spoke to his self-management. He said Chad was an anomaly, right? He was a cut above. He went above and beyond. He was calm. He was assured. He was constantly studying. So even in the face of battling colon cancer for these 4 years, look at the character, content of character, discipline. Then he says, and this is then he says, oh, sorry, this is from the BBC.com. Uh, his ancestors spoke through him. What an incredible mark he's left for us. Another quote says, he was undergoing treatment while filming hit movies. That's self-management. I don't know anybody who could have done that. And so it speaks to his heroism. It speaks to his self-determination. It spoke to his discipline. You know, while filming hit movies, The Avengers, Endgame, 21 Bridges, and The Five Bloods. However, listen, he never discussed his diagnosis in public. And Kugler, which was his friend, said he shielded his collaborators from his suffering. That's self-management. And you can go back to Elsa with her anger. You know, she shielded, she should have, well, at the end of the movie, she learned how to shield her sister from the results of her anger. But here, when you teach this self-management, you are shielding others from the negative consequences of your decisions. And my students were suspended students, so I would take this and just walk the floor with it. You know, who's been affected? Again, use the restorative practice question. Who has been affected by your suspension? Me? Okay, who else has been affected? My mom. Why? Because she has to take out work and drive me, and then she has to leave early and so forth. You know, who else has been affected? The boy that I fought. Why? Because he's suspended too, and his mom has. So you want to get them to think. You want to get them the thrust of these SEL groups. You know, is number one to get the student to talk and then think. You want them to slow down and think, and then you want them to talk so they can learn how their thought process works. Okay, so this is a video that Chadwick, I believe this was posted last year, and it's about a 2.5 minute video. And so we're going to watch this and just get a little bit more insight. Remember, because I said you got to do that back.
Ladies and gentlemen, Chadwick Boseman.
I know personally that your generosity extends past what you have given on the stage and screen. Many of you already know the story that Mr. Washington, when asked by Felicia Rashad to join her in assisting 9 theater students from Howard University who had been accepted to a summer acting program at the British Academy of Dramatic Acting in Oxford, he gracefully and privately agreed to contribute. As fate would have it, I was one of the students that he paid for. Imagine receiving a letter that your tuition for that summer was paid for and that your benefactor was none other than the dopest actor on the planet. I have no doubt that there are similar stories at boys and girls clubs and theaters and churches across the country where I know you have also inspired and motivated others. An offering from a sage and a king is more than silver and gold. It is a seed of hope, a bud of faith. There is no Black Panther without Denzel Washington. And not just because of me, but my whole cast, that generation stands on your shoulders. The daily battles won, the 1,000 territories gained, the many sacrifices you made for the culture on film sets through your career, the things you refused to compromise along the way, laid the blueprints for us to follow. And so now, let he who has watered be watered. Let he who has given be given too. It is an honor to now know you, to learn from you, and join in this work with you. May God bless you exceedingly and abundantly more in what's in store than he ever has before. God bless you.
So listen, I don't have to tell you how touching that was. I mean, of course, we can see Mr. Boseman's physical appearance. He was certainly losing weight by that time. But he remained strong to the end, despite his diagnoses, despite his battle with colon cancer. So I thought that was a powerful video, and you don't have to show it to your students, but I certainly wanted to show it to you so that you could get a better idea of the mindset that Mr. Boseman had during that last year. This video, that video was recorded 1 year ago. 1 year ago, and he's attributing his success to Mr. Denzel Washington. I mean, that I don't know what else could speak of self-management than that. So we're going to look into some questions because, with that being said, you want to look into, what was important to him, what was important to Chadwick that persuaded him to keep his secret to himself. What was important to him? What did Chadwick focus on while battling his illness? And these are just questions that you can pose your group, or you can come up with your own. I'm just giving you some ideas to roll with. Who benefited from Chadwick's self-management skills? Look at that entire audience. Did you see Denzel Washington's wife, the way she responded? She was floored with the words that flowed from Mr. Boseman's lips. So he encouraged, he inspired, he uplifted people despite his own challenge. What would have happened if Chadwick disclosed his illness? You think he would have been chosen to speak at an award ceremony for Denzel? Probably not. He would have been surrounded by sympathy, and he wouldn't have had an opportunity to pursue those movies. So, there are decisions that we make that have consequences. And is it more important to benefit someone else than me? It's just a question. So why is self-management important? So with self-management here, self-control, maintaining activity, which was what Mr. Boseman did, minimizing disruptions. He managed his time very wisely. With the short time he had on the earth, he managed his time wisely. He set priorities. And so these are all fruits of a person with self-management. And of course, clarifying what is important. So in closing, you want to inspire your students to defeat the odds. You're going to use examples of Elsa in Frozen. You're going to use the example of Dre in The Karate Kid. And you're certainly going to use the example of Mr. Chadwick Boseman with his life story and help inspire your students to defeat the odds that are set against him. Remind them that everyone is facing challenges, especially right now. But the question is, how successful are they managing their emotions or their frustrations or their disappointments? So life is, and you've got a choice, either life is what happened to you or what I make happen. And in Mr. Boseman's case, he made his life happen. So here is a good place to check out with your students' feelings before you end the lesson, particularly because of the nature of what we talked about. I teared up a little bit because we've all lost loved ones, but his story is just so unique and so inspiring. And so even as I watched it, I was like, wow, I had Kleenex, but it was a powerful lesson on self-management. So check out your students, okay? Make sure that they're all right. Um, because of course during the pandemic many have lost loved ones, friends, many lost opportunities, loss of wealth, just loss, period. So check on them and make sure they're okay. If you find a student who's in the green, excuse me, in the blue, and they're grieving or they feel depressed, then dismiss the group, but keep that student and work with them. Do a one-on-one and work with them and get them out of that blue. I like to say, walk them across the street and get them to the green. If you can get them yellow, that's wonderful, but at least help them to get here to the green, okay, where they can accept what has happened. Well, listen, this is the end of our SEL starter group. Our focus has been self-management, and it is my hopes that I've shared some techniques and given you guys some ideas to use in your own groups, provided you with some material. Listen, if you have any questions or any concerns, please don't hesitate to reach out. I work in student discipline and behavior support under Dr. Lisa Barnes and Mr. Reggie Coles. And my office is in SPA, okay, central office. And you have my number, 980-344-0401. You have my email. If you have questions or perhaps you'd like me to assist you in developing your own SEL lesson plans, I have tons of material and had a wonderful opportunity to facilitate groups for the last 2 years. And I thoroughly enjoyed it. I enjoyed it. So if you need help on any wise, please don't hesitate to reach out. You can also reach out to my colleagues, Mr. Moses Balls or Mr. David Spellman in behavior support, and we will be more than delighted to sit down with you, sit down with your team, and maybe even sit in on some of your SEL groups and provide some feedback. We're here to support you, okay? So don't hesitate to reach out. If you don't mind, and coming to the end, the very end, I would love your feedback. I'd like to know your thoughts. What worked for you? What didn't work? What was helpful? What was not helpful? What do you need more from? I'd like some feedback so that as we continue to develop material and build our campus course for behavior support, I want to, and I'm sure that my team wants to do that with your thoughts and your feedback in mind. So if you would scan this QR code, it's going to take you directly to a Google Doc form. And there's about, I don't know, 5, 6, 7 questions there where you can leave us some input and just let us know how we're doing and how we can better serve you. Okay. Well, take care. Be safe. Till next time.